medical situation. But it's interesting to me nowadays. I see a lot of teenagers that, 18, 19, they don't have their driver's license. They aren't interested in getting it, and that's just puzzling to me. When we were kids, I don't know anybody that didn't want to get it as soon as they could. 15 and a half, they were getting in line getting their learner's permit. That was a sense of freedom, I think, for teenagers. I think also to 9/11, when that occurred, I think, for me anyway, it was one of the first times where fighting for freedom was real. It wasn't just something that you learn about in a book. It's like, yeah, people really don't like us because of the freedoms we have, because of the country we are, and it just kind of drove the point home, at least for me. So what about you? I mean, what does freedom mean to you? Does it mean do anything you want to do? I had a definition written down here. So you can think, the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. I guess that's not bad. The Bible speaks of freedom. We had a verse or two up here today that mentioned that, but the Bible speaks of freedom in several places. One of them is in 1 Peter chapter 2. A few verses here say, submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every institution, whether to a king as the one in authority, or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bond slaves of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. We look also in Galatians. Galatians 5, verse 13 says, for you were called to freedom, brethren, only do not turn your freedom in an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's from Galatians 5:13. And if we go to John, a verse I'm sure you've heard before, beginning with verse 31 says, so Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, the truth will make you free. And so Jesus there is saying, if you know the truth. What truth is that? That's the truth of salvation. In these three passages we read about freedom, it's not exactly what this definition I read to you said, freedom to act, speak, or think as you want without hindrance or restraint. There are responsibilities that come with freedom. And I think one of the things we read here said that today. We have the freedom to serve God, to become a servant of God, and to serve him. We have the freedom to serve others. In Galatians, it said, to love one another. That's one of the two great commandments, right? To love one another and serve one another. And in the last one, the truth will set you free. Well, the truth that leads to salvation is what sets us free. Because now we're free from sin. Doesn't mean we aren't tempted, but because of salvation, because of our serving God, we have that freedom in Christ. So we do have responsibilities with freedom. And as I think of our nation's birthday today and the freedoms we have, what freedoms do we have through the government? The first thing I thought of was the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Do you have that, Harv? It lists some of them, and this is a commonly cited one. There are others. The Bill of Rights has 10 amendments. But let's take a look at what this says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So how many freedoms does that list there? See, freedom of no establishment of religion, and it doesn't prohibit the exercise thereof. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to redress grievances against the government. So that's 5 listed right there in that First Amendment. Now, are these absolute? Well, we know that there's some guardrails on this. For example, the law respecting the establishment of religion. We don't have an established religion in this country, and they can't prohibit the free exercise thereof. Well, what about this last year? Weren't there some churches that were told to close down, not to worship? Now, it was challenged in court, thankfully, and the churches won. But there are guardrails with all of these freedoms. The freedom of speech. You can't, what's the old expression? You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So there are some responsibilities there. There's some guardrails. Freedom of the press. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on the law, but there's libel suits, and there are things that you can bring if you are defamed and can prove it. The right of the people to peaceably assemble. I was thinking about this. Barb and Denise and their family is going to Victoria's wedding coming up this coming Saturday. That had to be postponed. I'm hoping the wedding would be a peaceable assembly, but it was postponed because of the pandemic last year. We know of another wedding that was postponed. It's going to be next month. So you've heard that all over. But we do have the right, because of the special circumstances of the pandemic, people postpone them for different reasons. And petitions for the government to the government for a redress of grievances. I happened to be at a 4th of July block party yesterday, and there was a guy there. He had like flag socks on, and he had a T-shirt. He said, "My governor is an idiot." And it had a California flag next to it. So being ever the smart aleck, I said, that's actually a shirt you could wear in a lot of states. But he said he wore it because he said one of the great freedoms we have, he thinks the most patriotic thing is being able to, tell the government or speak your mind on what the government has to say. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. He can. He can walk around the street with that, and it's perfectly legal. That wouldn't be true in every society. So we're grateful for the freedoms that we have. But with freedom does come responsibility. And there's a basis for our freedom. And I would submit to you, and I think if you look into our history, you'll see that the freedom that we have comes with a responsibility, with a moral responsibility. And our founders, by and large, that foundation is Christianity. You see throughout our founding, you see on public buildings in the Capitol, you see in the writings of our founders, you see a variety of different things where they believe not only in morality, but they believe in God, in the God of the Bible, and in Jesus Christ. When I say we're a Christian nation, that doesn't mean that you have to be a Christian to live here. This first freedom here, first thing right off the bat says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. But the undergirding morality that our freedoms are based on has to do with Christianity. So I think it's important. John Quincy Adams, who was the 6th president and was also at one time the chairman of the American Bible Society, said, "From the time of the Declaration of Independence, the American people were bound by the laws of God and laws of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which they all acknowledge as the root of their conduct. We all came together to obey the word of God." Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who was our 3rd president, of course, he said the First Amendment created a wall of separation between church and state, but in one direction. It keeps the government from running the church, but makes sure that Christian principles will always stay in government. That's important to think about, that the Christian principles stay there. This amendment was written by a guy named John Leland, who happened to be a preacher. I'd never heard that before, but I thought that was kind of an interesting point. And different patriots, different Americans had different things to say about it. I just want to read a few to you. George Washington. I'm guessing you've heard of him. He said, "I am sure there never was a people who had more reason to acknowledge a divine interposition in their affairs than those of the United States." He said that He said that to somebody back in 1792. And I really like this one from Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry, you remember, he was from Virginia. He's the one who's most famously known for saying, "As for me, give me liberty or give me death." This one you may not know as well, but I think it's really important. It says, "It cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians, not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. For this very reason, people of other faiths have been afforded asylum, prosperity, and freedom of worship here." That's really an interesting statement. You know, not only was it founded by Christians, but people of other faiths can come here too because of our Christian founding. George Washington, once again, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible." And then John Adams, who was the second president, said, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." So you see, just by these few quotes here, what our founders thought of as an underpinning of the freedom of hymn. One last one says, this is from Andrew Jackson, and this was a little bit later, this was in 1837. It says, "Providence has showered on this favored land blessings without number, and has chosen you as the guardian of freedom to preserve it for the benefit of the human race. May he who holds in his hands the destinies of nations make you worthy of the favors he has bestowed, and enable you, with pure hearts and pure hands and sleepless vigilance, to guard and defend to the end of time the great charge he has committed to your keeping." So our founders obviously believed that this was what we were to base our nation on. We are free to act, but we're free to act within the confines of our belief in Christianity. There's a book here that I was reading some articles from. We don't have time to read all of it now, but it talks about George Washington. It talks about divine providence in America, how God's hand has been on America from the beginning. Now, of course, this is a belief. Some people may believe it, some don't. But it talks about George Washington, for example. And I think it was in the French and Indian War. He was aide to the general who was in charge. And he went riding. Now, George Washington, they say, was about 6'2". And he was sitting up tall in the saddle, and he was riding, and they were getting shot at. And I'm really paraphrasing this, but and I know Harvey knows the story because he's told it as well. And he got shot at like 5 or 6 times. He got one horse shot out from under him. He went and got another one. He got that horse shot out from under him. And when he got on the third horse, he got bullets that went through his coat, but never hit him. And he was safe. People even at the time, and he was like a 23-year-old colonel. I mean, he wasn't the great general that we came to know later on. And people say this was the hand of God. This wasn't just lucky circumstances. Too many times that it happened. And of course, he's the father of our country, and one of the great leaders that helped us get established. I believe that. Some may not, but I believe that God has had a hand in our country all along. And I believe he has blessed us all along. I think we live under his blessing because we've been a nation who worshipped him. As a people of God, we expect our leaders to exhibit these attributes, but I also think we as a people, we have a responsibility. Maybe we've never served in the military, maybe we've never done some of those things that we honor and support, but we have a responsibility as a Christian in this country if we want to maintain our freedoms. We need to continue to pray. We need to work that God's will be done. We need to work that we continue to honor him. And my favorite movie the movie Patton, for those who don't know, you should, but for those who don't know, he was a great general in World War II. He won a lot of battles. And so the movie is about his life, and he was a colorful character, and he won a lot of battles, and had highs and lows, and it kind of goes through all of that. But at the very end of the movie, it shows him walking in the field, and he voices over a reading from Roman warriors, and he mentions how the Romans, when they would conquer a city, they would come in and then they would have a big parade, and the conquering general would be in a chariot, and all the people would be, fawning at him and cheering him. And they said, and they always had someone in the back while he was getting all this adulation. There was someone in the back whispering in his ear, "Glory is fleeting," just to remind him that this is a great victory, but the job isn't done. And I would say that we as Americans today, we've had great victories. We live in the freest country in the world, the greatest country in the world, I would suggest to you. But the job isn't done. We still need to continue to be vigilant. And I want to read to you from 2 Chronicles. And this is, the temple had just been finished being built. And it says, "Thus Solomon finished the house of the Lord and the king's palace, and successfully completed all that he had planned on doing in the house of the Lord and in his palace. Then the Lord appeared to Solomon at night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. If I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, and my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer offered in this place. For now I have chosen and consecrated this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, even do according to all that I have commanded you, and will keep my statutes and my ordinance, then I will establish your royal throne as I covenanted with your father David, saying, You shall not lack a man to be ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot you from my land which I have given you. And this house which I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight, and I will make it a proverb and a byword among all peoples. What is God saying here? He's saying, if you turn away, you have this great temple. If you humble yourselves and worship me, you continue to be blessed. But if you go in another direction, stop following, start worshiping other gods, I'll take it all away. This was a warning to the Jewish people. But I believe it still applies today. I believe this applies in our own country. God has greatly blessed us. And we, as I mentioned, we've been a nation underpinned by Christian principles, and we've been, I think, by and large, a Christian nation. But if we turn away, if we as the people of God turn away and start going on our own path and forgetting everything he's done for us, it could all go away for us real quickly. And so we do have a responsibility. Let's go out and celebrate today. What is our 245th birthday? Is that right? So pretty close, if not. I don't know about you. I like fireworks as much as the next person. But, and we have a great country to celebrate. Sometimes when you listen to the news, you wouldn't think so, but we really do. And so we need to celebrate that. But we also need to continue to understand why our nation has been great. Because God has blessed us. And because the people honor God. And we as the people of God need to continue to do that and make sure that we follow and do his will. All right. I think we have a great closing song, patriotic closing song.
Yeah, we do. Get this right this time.
What's that?
If I get it right this time, I'm going to turn the volume up.